the Danmark. Now, this would not seem to be our normal Sunday fare, and, well, I can understand why you might not think it would be. But it's actually pretty interesting. And if I'm going to be doing short videos for these key ship series, because, honestly, there is only so many hours in a day, and I'm actually recording this in the morning before I go off to set up the centre. So, it's been a busy week, let's say. Well, I need to have something which is a bit of a meaty topic for you to get into. Something that's going to give you a lot of things to think about. Well, how about the American Civil War? How about the Second Schleswig War? How about being built by who were at that point J&G Thompson, but would go on to become John Brown and Company on the Clydebank? How's that sound interesting? Oh, and by the way, this is an ironclad built because the purchasers couldn't buy the Gloire off the French. They basically felt, you know, well, what can we say? What can we do? You know, the British aren't going to sell Warrior, so let's go and try and buy the Gloire. I'm not sure if I'd have wanted to cross the Atlantic in the Gloire, let alone try and use it to break the Union blockade. But hey-ho, life happens. Shameless book plug. Yee! We all like a shameless book plug. And let's be honest. It's a beautiful book. You know, people look at a picture sometimes and go, does it really look like that picture? Well, I have proof. I have my very battered, my own personal copy, which has notes for my next book and next books in and all sorts of things in because I use it. But look, it really does look like it. It's really that pretty. And there really are the seagulls. Hey, a historian's got to pay the bills. And eat. So, this is a Danish ironclad. So that's first of all something interesting for you all. It's a Danish ironclad. And it's built braw. You know, it's a single shaft, single steam engine vessel with 4 boilers supplying that engine. It's got full ship rigging. It's got a top speed of 8 knots, a crew of 530. And it's got a belt of armour which is between 3.5 and 4.5 inches thick. Battery protection the same. It's not the largest vessel in the world. It isn't going to win any speed races going on time. But it's a very capable little vessel. And it was being built for the contract price of £190,000 sterling. Or 2 million Confederate dollars. At the then exchange rate. You always have to remember that the British are, to an extent, especially in the early part of the American Civil War, very laissez-faire over it. The French get all sorts of upset. They refuse to allow Gloire to be sold or for a sister strip to be built in French yards, mainly because the French get put out by a lot of things, but also because, and please don't think there's a burning desire of the French to support the Union cause. No, the French are very certain that the quickest way for the Confederates to lose is for the British to support the Union blockade. And the French think that if they start supplying ships to the Confederates, that'll make the British join. And the French think that if America breaks itself apart... Bless you. Sorry, apologies. I don't know where that came from. The French think if America breaks itself apart, then they might have some pickings. And you have to remember, the French have suffered severely for their empire so far in this period. They really have. So, she's ordered in July 1862. She is ordered in July 1862. Now, considering the British attitude, it's unsurprising that her status and ease of construction has a dramatic change of fortunes as times go on. After the proclamation in 1863, things get more and more of an issue. And by the summer of 1863, the Confederate agents in Europe are seeking to sell off the ship by offering her to the Imperial Russian Navy. It was by this point considered unsuitable to Confederate needs, being too large and requiring too large a crew for their limited resources. Her draft of 6 meters was also too deep for operations in shallow waters and shoal waters off the coast of the Confederates. And Thompsons were pretty much sure they weren't going to be allowed to deliver the ship to the Confederates, in the fact that the political climate had changed. They were basically being told by the government, you can build it, but you ain't delivering it. Now, this could, of course, have the option of going like a couple of rams did and other vessels did, and ending up in Royal Navy service. But they didn't, because Thompsons decided they were going to cancel the contract in 1863. But they continued to slowly work on the ship. And she's launched in February 1864. And that's when her career starts to really get interesting. Now, the Second Schleswig War is otherwise known as the Dano-Prussian War. So, it's when the Danish find themselves fighting the Prussians and the Austrians. Think about that. Denmark alone taking on the Austrians and the Prussians. And this is when Denmark loses a lot of territory. In fact, all the territory which makes the Kiel Canal, etc., viable and secure for the Germans is lost to Denmark during this period. Lost by Denmark during this period. Sorry. Some of my notes are in German. I was doing mild translation in my head. I should have just put them all in English to begin with. Now, the First Schleswig War had managed to be suppressed because the Germans in both the territories had tried to secede from Denmark, and Denmark did have quite a liberal constitution. There's a German majority in Holstein and in southern Schleswig, and they wanted to become first of all sovereign independent states. However, it got suppressed, and the King of Denmark remained also the Duke of the Duchies of Holstein and Schleswig. As Denmark attempted in the 1850s and 1860s to integrate Schleswig into the Danish kingdom, there was a lot of agitation pushed forward by a gentleman called Bismarck, primarily, but others as well, for Holstein and Schleswig to be included in a Greater Germany. Holstein was considered completely ethnically German at this point, and had been a German fief before 1806, and was part of the German Confederation from 1815, so you can see where their grounds are. Now, Schleswig was a Danish fief, and mixed between German, Danish, and North Frisian. There's a mixture going on. But again, the German component are really pushing hard to go, yeah, we want to become part of Germany, and kind of ignoring the fact that most of their neighbours are not German. Now, before the Middle Ages, the people of Schleswig had spoken Danish and Frisian, and as late as the 18th century, most of the rural areas had. So it has slowly shifted. In the 19th century, the northern and middle parts of Schleswig still spoke Danish, but the southern half had shifted to Germanish. And German culture was especially dominant amongst the clergy and nobility, who were often connected with Germany and were often pushing it. So it's a case of, it's a very interesting revolution, because you have a liberal constitution coming in, which is in Denmark, which is pretty darn freeing, and would give a lot of people a lot of interest in what's going on. But you have this sort of nobility section which are going, no, we want to join the German one, when we all know the German constitution, as it's set up especially by the Prussians, is not really that liberal. And it basically, you have almost window dressing in terms of parliament. Nobility still retain the vast majority of power, and the Kaiser especially. Now, there's also another realistic political thing going on at this point. There is another reason for building the Kiel Canal, and it's not entirely about naval linking. You have to remember the Danish charge a toll for ships passing through the Danish Straits between the Baltic Sea and North Sea. That's the major reason why Denmark has managed to keep itself sovereign and economically viable, because it could tax the trade going between the Baltic and the rest of the world. That's one of the reasons why the Prussians and Austrians get involved. They want to build a Kiel Canal, but that could not be built as long as Denmark ruled Holstein. As long as Denmark ruled the land, why would they build a canal which would go round them? Unfortunately, you then have a small problem. You have the fact that Frederick VII of Denmark, who is, by all things, not really the worst gentleman in the world, kept having his marriages end in scandal and divorce. And unfortunately, His later marriage, well, didn't have issue. Although was very happy, but it was to a ballerina and it was considered a bit ooh by some. But yeah, she seems to have been a decent queen. And so there are rival heirs to the throne, and we all know what happens in that scenario. The Germans supported the House of Augustenberg, which was a cadet branch of the family. But most of the Danes supported the Glucksburg branch, which was who would actually win and would actually become King Christian, become Christian IX. The fact that Prince Christian had served on the Danish side during the First Schleswig War, and the Augustenbergs were considered far too pro-German and far too Germanic. In fact, there was a worry amongst some that they actually might bring Denmark into the Greater Germany. It's highly unlikely. Please note, I do not believe it would have happened. Very rarely do kings give up their titles of being kings. But it would certainly have brought Denmark into the German orbit firmly. And that is why you get a war. Now, unfortunately, for the Denmark, as far along in the process as she was to being completed, and she was pretty much along in the process to being completed. Now, as you can see, she goes, especially during the commission, she takes a while fitting out, and that's why she's not ready for war. She's launched in 1864, finished in 1864. Her final commission ends in 1869. She's only commissioned once. And as you can see, her armament changes quite a lot. But in 1864, it's 20 60-pounders and 18 18-pounders. 8800 weights for the 60-pounders and 4800 weight for the 18-pounders. In 1865, they drop 8 of the 60-pounder guns, and they add in and all the 18-pounders, and they add in 10 24-pounders. By 1867, this have reached 12 60-pounders and 12 24-pounders. And that's purely rate of fire. The 60-pounder has the punch, but it doesn't have the rate of fire. Unfortunately, it was found that when at sea, well, she rolled violently. Her coal consumption was extremely high. And, well, she was too expensive and pretty much useless. So she thereafter is turned into a reserve and barrack ship. Eventually scrapped in 1907. So, why is she a key ship? Well, she's a key ship because she's interesting. She's ordered in a hurry. She's built in a fuss. She's commissioned too late for the second war she's supposed to be part of. And she turns out to be terrible. And let's be honest, if she's that bad in the Baltic, imagine what she'd be like crossing the North Atlantic. Saying that, though, it's a ship like this which the Confederates did actually probably need. Why? Because if you're going to break a blockade, you need something which can take a fight to the blockaders. Not just in the narrow waters, you need something that can take a fight to them. This is why the often quoted phrase is, well, you know, there is one power that could save the South, and that's the British in the American Civil War. I'm not sure whether or not that's quite true. I'm fairly... The British could have broken the blockade. the British could have. I'm sorry. The Union in the fleet does grow mightily, but there is nothing in the Union fleet that is built that can take on the procession of ocean-going ironclads the Royal Navy has in service during this period. There just isn't. And there are other ships as well the British have access to. So it's just... And then you've got the yards and the manufacturing capability, and the fact that the Union are fighting a massive land war, as well as we'll be fighting a naval war, and that would just be problematic as anything. Especially once the British industry started supplying the South. And the South was able to buy stuff from everyone else, because the British will convoy it. The thing was, though, that was never going to happen because the British were never going to, especially after the Emancipation Proclamation, the British were just not going to get in support in the South. There just wasn't the political support at home in either the ruling classes or the public. And I know there are people who will go, well, you know, there's this person. Yeah, there are always fringes. There are always people who will make their noise. If you want proof of that, there's Twitter. There's always someone making noise on Twitter about something going, I disagree with this, and often they are picked up by newspapers who want to show there's a range of the best discussion, debate going on, and then you look into it, and actually, it's one person and their dog. One person and their dog, and that's me being charitable. Ooh, what have we got coming up? More key ships. And today is Sunday, so the patron vote should have gone live. Or it might go live tomorrow, but it should have gone live today. If the Wi-Fi in the travel lodge I'm staying is working, it will have gone live today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you found it interesting. And look up the Second War of Schleswig. It's pretty darn cool. The Danish really try. They're just absolutely hopelessly outnumbered. If anyone was crying out for a large militia-based army, that would be a sort of home guard, it was Denmark in this period. Yeah. Basically, they needed a whole load of grizzled veterans spread around the country with a load of young'uns going, right then, how can we make this road as impassable as possible, or this river crossing, this bridge, anything to buy time and wind up the Prussians. Cause the Prussian-Austrian High Command to have trouble and break up. It would have helped. Thank you for watching.